The following is a meditation by Stephen Cotterill called The Nail. I've adapted it for time-wise. You're going to meet three characters, all facing the question, were you responsible for Jesus' death? You'll meet the Roman centurion, then Pilate, and finally Judas Iscariot. The Roman centurion. Look, as far as we were concerned, this was just another job. This is a rat hole of a place to be stationed, and believe me, at this time of year, there are troublemakers aplenty who need their wings clipped. First I heard about him was that he went straight to the temple. I mean, can you believe it? It's like he'd a death wish. He goes straight to the temple itself, where these Jews really do believe some funny stuff about their God, and he's the real Bruce Willis. He tries to ransack the place single-handed, turning the tables, calling it a den of thieves, chasing out the moneylenders and the salesmen. I says to my mate, he don't half choose his time. Only the Passover festival when they come into the city from all over the country and get as high as kites. So the last thing that we need is some trumped-up messiah from the country coming to town and not just stirring up the people against us, but challenging their own leaders. It was bound to happen. He got squeezed on both sides. All we did was the deed itself. But I'll grant you this. There was something about him that got under my skin. He got to me because right through his trial, when we led him away, we couldn't get to him. You know, when that happens, that you go for it. You know there'll be a point where he caves in. So we each took it in turns with a cat of nine tails. We dressed him up in a purple gown, bowing to him and all, but he didn't flinch. I mean, clearly it hurt him just like any other man, but he looked at us with no anger. So I struck him in the face and I spat on him because his coolness just made me angrier still. But when I looked at him, all I could see was sadness. But it wasn't an inward-looking depression, but an open-eyed sadness. I tell you, he unnerved me when we nailed him to the wood, and he didn't struggle. He didn't fight. He didn't spit or shout or rage. He just looked up, like he was looking beyond me, like he could see someone else, like something was sustaining him, even in the middle of all of this. And believe me, this is a horror. This is a God-forsaken way to die, slow and very painful. And then he says, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Well, this was my job, and I knew that what I was doing. If Pilate had any sense, he'd have got us to kill that monkey Barabbas and let this Jesus go. The way the crowds were that day, I think they might have stoned him themselves. But if you want someone to blame, well, that's a different matter. Look to him what gave the order. Pilate, he's your man. That's the truth of it. Pilate. Truth? You'll forgive me if I don't join in the merriment. It's never as simple as you think. Very rarely black or white. Not as clear as you'd imagine. There's usually shades of grey that run into each other. But truth itself? It's uncommon. Elusive, like trying to catch the wind. That was Jesus' mistake. He saw it clearly, or he thought he did. So take off your blinkers. Stop pointing fingers at me and consider one of the few bits of black and whiteness in this whole sorry episode. Look, I tried to release him. I didn't want him killed. It was what I had to do to keep the peace. The crowd had turned on him. There was no other choice. Events had got out of hand. The crowd got ugly. Everyone was screaming, "Crucify him! Crucify him! Do away with him," they shouted. "Do your duty to Rome. He threatens your authority. Go on, do it." His own religious leaders were frightened of him. I could see that. But they were also frightened of the crowd. The crowd could have stoned him, but they wanted us to help solve the problem of Jesus. They wanted their own hand clean. And I gave him so many chances to evade the bait. It was almost as if he was determined to die. It was as if he wanted the nails to pierce him, as if he was embracing the cross. This man was not mad. He was not just doing this for himself. That's why I wanted to release him. This Barabbas the crowd were so keen to save was a monster, a murderer, a menace. But you know, he lives and this good man Jesus dies. What sense does it make? But I'm not going to be blamed for this. I spoke plainly. I find no case against him. I let the crowds decide. So if you want a culprit, a scapegoat, if you want someone to say, look, it was me, I hammered the nails into his hands, I am guilty, I killed him, then don't look at me. My hands are clean. Look instead at his own leaders. They handed him over. They have the greater blame. Speak to Annas. Speak to the high priest Caiaphas. Speak to his own disciples. Go on, speak to Judas. Don't you understand? I'm innocent. Now leave me be. Finally, let us hear from Judas. I've got to explain. I've got to make you understand, for it's not what it looks like. We'd all hoped so much, probably too much, but we really had thought that Jesus might be the one who could set our people free, break that bondage from Rome, renew our people's confidence, help us to see that we are God's chosen people, that we could again become a mighty nation. And it had begun so well. Well, he spoke well, didn't he? He was the first person who really hungered for the kingdom like I do. But then things changed. He began to speak as if he was more than the anointed one. He began to speak in riddles about seeds and about his dying. I remonstrated with him. What's the good of dying? What help is suffering? Isn't there enough suffering in the world? What we need is action. We need someone who can inspire people, lead them. But Jesus was unyielding. He spoke about loving till the end, but this seemed to be like rolling over. Suffering, dying, even when your face is pushed in the dirt. That's weakness, I told him. But he looked at me. Every day as we turned towards Jerusalem, I began to feel further and further from him. Then last night things reached a head. We'd everything ready for Passover when he gets a towel and he looks to wash our feet. It was so demeaning. I mean, Peter winced with embarrassment. And then he tells us that we must wash each other's feet. Is that it? And he breaks some bread. And I don't recognize him anymore. If I'm honest, I think he saw my disgust. Did he guess what was on my mind? He even said that someone sharing with him was a betrayer. At that point, I left. I wasn't betraying anything. As faithful to all that we had believed in, he was the one who had changed. Suddenly, where he had been so active, so determined, he was passive, just letting it happen around him. I couldn't stand it anymore. So I wanted to bring things to a head. I went to Caiaphas so the truth would come out. I know it's hard, but he needs to know that he's not what he thinks he is. He is not the Messiah he was meant to be. You don't change the world by turning the other cheek. You don't change the world by loving people, by washing people's feet, a way of changing the world. What happened next was not my plan or my doing. Yes, I identified him with the usual greeting, but I didn't see what happened next. He'd become very small for me. I heard that he loved to the end, even when the nails were hammered in, but I don't know. I feel only cold, like the shadow of the cross upon me. And now you want to blame me for this? You want your pound of flesh. You want someone to bear the weight of it. But this is his doing. It is where such loving leads. And it can't change anything, can it? Well, look in the mirror if you want a culprit. Don't heap it all on me. Haven't you heard what the others have said? You were the ones who cheered him and sang hosannas and waved your branches. You lifted him up and now you brought him down. You were the ones who cried for his blood. You were the ones who wanted him dead. You were the ones who smiled in grim satisfaction when he breathed his last. Yes, if you want someone to blame for the death of Jesus Christ, look no further than yourself. It was your sin, your pride, your refusal to love just as much as mine that put him there. Don't deny it. You hammered in the nails, every single one of them, every one of you.